watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Chris Tanev got traded, and it's not to Toronto, so cancel the show. Just kidding. We're here for the Thursday edition of Leafs Morning Take, presented by Betano, Nick Alberga, and Jay Rosehill. How are we doing, Rosie?
We are, all right. How about you? Kind of sad. Tanev was he's not a world beater or anything, but he's kind of a guy that I thought would be a good fit. You never know, but on to other things, I guess, man. He gone.
It's weird having a patient GM, you know, because they've had a pushover GM for X amount of years, and now somebody who's going to exercise patience and not be like, okay, we'll take it. We'll give you a first for Chris Tanev. It's mixed reviews, I think, in this market today. Having said that, dude, I don't know why you would get involved in a market that makes no sense. Like this is a shit market. People are overplaying the deadline in general. I wouldn't say that just this year, every year, but this market stinks. And I would never, ever pay a first round pick or plus for a guy like Chris Tanev. How'd you feel about him going to Dallas?
Yeah, I get it. I knew there'd be other people in the works. I thought it might happen closer to the deadline, but I guess we're creeping up on it. Would have liked to make a deal for him, but I in the back of my mind, I had a feeling, they might not want to deal with Tree Living. They might not just.
Do you buy that? You buy that?
I kind of do. I don't know what happened there with him and his exit and how it all went, but I got the feeling that maybe, there's a lot of different guys on that outfit that could fit the Leafs, needs right now. And it just seems like they're just, and what do I know? I'm not in there. I'm not on the phones. I'm not in the office, but I just had this feeling like they're just like, maybe if you like overpay, but we're looking elsewhere. And I had a feeling someone else was going to just pay more than we were willing to pay. Like that first rounder is not going anywhere, like Easton Cowan's not going anywhere. So it's just like, I have a feeling they're going to want this and he's going to say no. And that's going to be the end of it. And I think that's kind of how it went down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things at play here. I mean, there's been reports the last couple of days that Tanev camp's going to look for $5 or $6 million AAV on their next contract. The guy's 34. Like, yeah, would he have been a perfect fit, at least right now? Maybe not so much long-term, yes. But do you just give up the farm to acquire Chris Tanev for a playoff run? I just couldn't get to that level. Like, the Flames got more than their asking price. If you recall, it was a second-round pick. They got a second plus, so a conditional third. I believe the condition is if Dallas makes a Stanley Cup final, then Calgary gets that third, and a prospect nobody's ever heard of. I just think people are so quick, Rosie, to jump to conclusions and say, oh, they don't want to work with the Leafs. No way. They said this about Zadorov too. I don't buy that. If you're Craig Conroy, the GM of the Calgary Flames, you are looking for the best deal possible. I don't care if it's Edmonton. I don't care if it's Toronto and the previous GM. I just would like to think GMs are not that petty.
Yeah, not petty, but just, again, I don't know what happened on the exit. I think there was something weird going on where they, barred him from going to the draft, and he's like, all these kind of weird stuff makes you think there might be some kind of weird underlying bad blood. But also with Conroy, like you're always measured against your predecessor and who came before you, rather. And if you do a big deal with him and it doesn't end up going bad, there's just going to be this whole layer of, he was better than you and he took advantage of you. And all the people that didn't want to see Tree Living go would say, see, I told you, look at him work Conroy over in the only deal they got done. So there might be a little bit of that, just egotistically. But I mean, at the end of the day, I do believe that it went down to they weren't willing to offer as much as others, and there was more teams after Chris Tanev than the Maple Leafs.
Well, that's a thing, right? I mean, the Leafs could have loved Chris Tanev as much as they wanted to, but there was like 5-6 teams involved. A tweet I put out on Wednesday night, Toronto was in it till the end. Sounds like Vancouver was as well to an extent. Edmonton was in there, but I think those were the final three. I mean, don't quote me on it, but it sounds like those three were the most aggressive, and ultimately he goes to Dallas. But like, let's not lose sight of the fact that they wanted a second rounder as like a starting asking price. And every time that's set, you probably have to go above and beyond to land the player. But in this scenario, the Leafs didn't have a second rounder. So I don't know what people expected the Leafs to do. Give up a first rounder? I guess that's what people are implying.
If they did, people would be, exactly. I mean, he'd come there with, a negative cloud over his head right off the beginning, and people would be watching that first rounder and what he became and always holding Tree Living's feet to the fire for. And I don't think that Tanev, like you said, is that big of a world beater to have, that big of a risk. I mean, look what look what Cowan's doing in the Ontario League right now as their late first round pick. And I mean, he's looking like, holy, this guy could potentially be a serious player. And then if you lose that guy for a run that doesn't work out and he doesn't re-sign, it's like, nice job. And it's tough. It's tough to be a GM, man. And, we got Chuck Fletcher coming on. We want to pick his brain a little bit today about what that's like and the pressure and the worry and you don't have a crystal ball. You're trying to make these deals and you're like, if this doesn't work out, it's gonna look real bad for me. And I mean, one bad deal is the writing on the wall for some guys when it comes to them being done with their tenure in an organization is looking back and saying, "Oh, you really botched that one deal, man, and it screwed us."
Because the fascination for me, and I think you make great points, but also from the Leafs perspective, they've tried the all-in approach. So, like, remember our conversation this time last year? It's like they added like 10, 11 new players, Ryan O'Reilly, like they gutted everything. I think Kyle Dubas knew exactly what he was doing. They tried that approach. They won a round. They still didn't get anywhere close to a Stanley Cup. And then you look conversely at Florida, didn't make any deals of significance around the deadline, and then they go to the Stanley Cup. They lose to Vegas. But like, on top of that, I just don't think it's a great market, as I mentioned. Like, Chris Tanev was the best defenseman outside of Noah Hannafin available. I still think a player of that ilk, it's a risky proposition because of the way he plays the game, where he literally jumps in front of pucks and heads the puck. Like, he's an injury away from missing significant time, and that's just the type of player you're picking up. So to go as far to say I'm going to give up a first-round pick for a guy like that, I just can't get to that level. Yeah, I think he would have improved the Leafs. I think he's going to improve Dallas immensely. He slots in perfectly on that blue line. I just think they have to be smart with their asset management, something I think they've been okay with in the past, but they probably could have done a better job with. Like, I don't necessarily think you have to go all in every year at the trade deadline. When does that ever work out for teams?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, you look at the New York Rangers last year adding
Exactly.
Tarasenko and Kane, and just it made them worse, basically. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is you're trying to make your team better at the trade deadline. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, while obviously a good hockey team, is capable of beating anybody, you want to shore up some of their weaknesses, which everyone agrees is their blue line. And you don't have to have, I mean, I'm looking at Eric Goodbranson right now going, okay, here's a big, veteran guy who can play tough and be solid. And yeah, he's not a top 4 guy, but just does the addition make the team better? And while nobody can know that for sure, because it's a locker room of chemistry and who works together, and sometimes you just throw things together and no one saw this team being good, or else everyone expected these guys to win their division and they're on a wild card spot. Like, no one can predict how these teams work together, but you got to start to look down the line and saying, okay, what's the objective here? Like, you get so focused on Tanev and Hennepin and these guys, just who's available that you could insert. And the further you go down the line, the less it costs you, which is also a benefit. But just try to get a body or two in there that you can truthfully say, I did my best to make this blue line better. And I think there's other players still out there that do that for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, they're just on that 7-game heater and looked like when they're playing together, they can be a really good hockey team. And, you don't necessarily have to, like you say, change 12 guys all right before the playoffs to make a run at it. You can tweak things a little bit as well. There's more than one way to skin a cat.
I think it's funny that this team didn't re-up Luke Schenn, and now they're looking for a Luke Schenn again at the deadline. Like, that's the type of player that, like, he just was such a perfect fit. Who knows if Schenner would have even re-signed here? We had that conversation with Schenner on this podcast. Reading the tea leaves, I don't think he wanted the noise. I think he's very, very happy in Nashville, but that's just my opinion. It's funny to me they're looking for the same type of player again,
Yeah, I know what you mean. They're, like a big, strong, tough, rugged right-handed defenseman. I mean, look at our blue line right now. We don't have a right-handed defenseman, and it's
Yeah.
like that's in the lineup as of lately, and it's tough. But Luke Schenn, you're at a cap crunch, and you got other guys, and you're bringing people in, and he's played his way into X amount of dollars, and you're 3 times less than that from what you can give him. It's just the writing's on the wall. Luke Schenn has grinded his way back into being a valuable defenseman in the NHL after making, being in the minors and making league minimum for quite a few years. And all of a sudden it's like, yes, I got paid. He's not going to say, yeah, I'll take 3 times less to get taxed out the ass and play in this huge Toronto market where scrutiny every single day. Nobody in their world would do that. They're going to take 3 times more and go play in Nashville and not get taxed anything and live that life just because it makes sense for his career, for his life, for his bank account, for his family, for his well-being. It's an obvious no-brainer. He played himself out of the market as far as what they were able to pay the guy at the time. But now when things change, you're looking for a Luke Schenn defenseman. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and again, Morgan Rielly has been looking for a partner for like 7 years. I guess that's not going to happen. I thought a perfect fit would have been Tanev. I don't think anybody available is going to be to that level, whether it's Matt Dumba, who we're going to get a look at again tonight for Arizona. I'm just very, very curious. Again, they don't want to give up that first rounder, so I think they're obviously going to trade a third or a fourth and add some depth, and maybe that's the way to go. Because again, barring something unforeseen, there's not really a trade out there that makes sense where it's like the Leafs have to get this guy. Tanev did, but to a level. You got to go to a level. You got to stand firm, which I think Brad Treliving should be commended for. Like you're going crazy time if you're going to trade a first rounder for Chris Tanev. Not really. You're lukewarm about the team. Having said that, I do think the team has earned, we talked about this maybe 3 weeks ago, prove it to your GM that he should go out and add. And I think they have. I truly do think they have, winning those 7 games. They've won 7 of 8. They've now pushed the ball back in Treliving's court and said, hey, we've helped you out. We've shown what we're capable of. Go help us out. And I think they will add, but they're going to trim around the edges a bit. I don't think they're going to add a guy who's a 2 or 3. I think it's going to be, further down the depth charts. And that's okay. I think you need to play up and down that lineup, but we always lose sight of the fact that it's got to be about the core 4, whatever you want to call them, the core 3. Like those are the guys who are going to lead you to the promised land at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're supposed to. And I mean, keeping an eye on the back end, like, would you say Morgan Rielly is tough to play with? Would you think that's an accurate assessment? It seems like guys kind of struggle to play with them, and it's not a knock on him or anything. But what's that?
He was good with Schenn.
Yeah, true. It's like, I don't know, like maybe a good Branson would work all right with him, defensively responsible, blah, blah. And sometimes you wonder, like, do you want 2 guys of the same ilk who understand each other and play the same and are thinking the same way out there who can make their plays? Or do you want a guy that's completely different where Morgan can go be offensively minded and jump up and take a bit of risks and be offensive and get up in the play, and then have a guy cover his ass and be watching those stretch passes and cover the lanes that maybe he is risking a little bit? And do you want 2 guys to complement each other, or would a guy like that be like, I don't know what Morgan's doing out there, I don't know where he is, he's thinking a different type of game than I am, and I go to make that outlet play or get my relief from my D partner, and he's in a different spot than I'm used to. I just find that guys are kind of struggling figuring that out. And at the end of the day, everybody needs to step it up in the playoffs, and you need your Benoit's and your Timmins is like, can he come back and help out right there? Like, he's a guy that could certainly help this blue line, but this goddamn mono has been there for weeks on end now. And the guys like that need to step up and say, oh man, did he ever make a big difference in the playoffs? Every team that does well and has a run has guys like that step up and elevate their game. And the Leafs are just not going to go on a big run if they don't have players do that this year.
Lots of moving parts, and as Rosie mentioned earlier on, we got Chuck Fletcher, NHL Executive, coming up in about 15 minutes from now. We're going to get a lay of the land of the trade deadline. What's it like to be a GM around the trade deadline? So we're going to paint that picture coming up with Chuck Fletcher at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts. Reminder, if you're watching right now, hammer that subscribe button, hammer that like button. Appreciate all of you who have left reviews, 5-star reviews over at Apple and wherever you catch your podcast. That's fantastic and great for us and a great help for us. So please continue to do so. 5-star review. Leave us a review as well. Brought to you by DoorDash. It's time for the appetizer. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off, up to $10 in value, and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. When you download the DoorDash app, enter code NATION25. That's code NATION25. All in uppercase, 25% off your first order with DoorDash. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. So lots of news and notes in the morning skate today. Positive news. We'll start with the back end. They're going back to Rielly on the left side. Brody's playing the right. So they're going Rielly, Brody, Benoit, McCabe, Gio, and Legason. So no Timothy Liljegren for the second straight game, Rosie.
They're going Rielly, Brody again?
Yeah, but Brody's playing the right side where he's been playing majority of the year.
Yeah. I thought they were breaking them up. Yeah, interesting, man. Yeah, no Lily again. Yeah, it'd be nice to get some concrete pairs here. It would be nice to get something that's clicking and working where it's clear that this is our best formula. This is our best three pairings. And here's a list of, evidence on why. And this is what we're going with. And these guys are just working on getting better and better and getting that chem going into the playoffs. But it just doesn't seem to be the way it goes in Leafland, man. It's just always got to be a blender. And if I had one big knock on Sheldon Keefe personally, that would be it. The fact that we just can't get a system of lines or defensive partners that are consistent.
Yeah, it's a mixed blender, but man, it's crazy to me after wins, after losses. It's the same story. I think of note, like Noah Gregor looks like he's going to be a healthy scratch again. That's going to be 4 straight, 5 of 6. Like he can't find himself back in the lineup. I get it. I think you want to roll with the lineup that's bringing you the most success. The fourth line was awesome the other night. That's probably the only most logical spot. But all of a sudden, there's too many bodies up front, Whereas like 3 weeks ago, we're like, crap, this team has no depth.
Yeah, things ebb and flow, and those depth guys have stepped up, and you've seen a lot of names that we've been either not even talking about or calling more from who have produced, and hence their run they've gone on. They've had their core four be really solid. The big boys are doing their job, and so is the supporting cast, and hence the 7 out of 8 wins is a fantastic record throughout, especially that road trip. So there are guys that are going to be in a jam, and Noah Gregor is one of them. I mean, I've been scratched before where, you'd probably get back in the lineup, but they just won't lose. And it's like 2 weeks go by and you're like, God, there's no chance they're going to shove me in for no reason until there's a reason to do it. And I think Gregor's finding himself in there, but that bit of competition is solid. I think that if Gregor gets back in there, I think he's going to be using his speed. He's going to be fresh. And, if he was smart, and we told him this when we kind of hinted at it when we interviewed him at the beginning of the season, I was like, use your speed, but fuck, I just wanted to tell him, like, can you go bang and fucking crash? And like, I don't care how big you are. It's not hard anymore in the NHL to finish every single hit. It's not like Adam Foote's out there feeding you a coho to the back of your neck every time you come near the guy. Go finish and bang and crash and just be an absolute buzzsaw, which you're totally capable of doing with your speed. And if you get caught down low, you can catch up because you're literally visibly faster than everyone out there. Go use it and don't let them take you out of the lineup. So if he's got that hunger and he's sitting there going, what the hell's going on right now? I need to get, my career back on track here. That little bit of healthy competition is good this time of year. So it's a good problem to have, I think, having a lot of guys that are capable of playing and that are doing well.
By the way, Matt Rempe didn't fight on Wednesday night for the New York Rangers against Columbus. He must be preparing for what's in store for Saturday, where you got to think the main event of that one's going to be Ryan Reeves against Matt Rempe. So maybe Reeves just by default draws another game in the lineup, but he's been really, really good. So, Rosie, you've been waiting, I guess, over 2 months for this day. There's no confirmation just yet from Sheldon Keefe, but Joseph Woll was the first goalie off the ice, which usually indicates he's starting. Hasn't played since December 7th. 35 games he missed in total. The Leafs went 20-11-4 in that time. Joseph Woll, we think, is returning tonight.
It's looking that way, isn't it? I'm excited. We talked about it yesterday. This makes the most sense by a million. It's almost like if you could draw it up, you'd probably do it this way. Coming off a loss, Sammy looks like he needs a bit of a break.
Yeah.
You're playing the lowly Arizona Coyotes. Like, could you pick a better opponent? I know they don't have a good home record against them, but that's going back to years past. I think they got a pretty good vibe going on from their last couple of weeks of solid play, and Woll's had a chance. I mean, I think he's been 100% healthy for, it'll be over a week probably, which is just like, he must be feeling good. He must be chomping at the bit. And to get in there against a team where if you play your game that you've played the last few weeks, the Toronto Maple Leafs in front of Joseph Woll, I think it's a recipe for success to get your potential star netminder to get his legs under him and to get that confidence back and to be feeling really good and feeling like he's back in the rhythm and flow of things. And I think it's set up perfectly. Now you just got to go get the job done tonight.
Yeah, and now you can start trending towards what you really mapped out to begin the year when it came to the crease, right? Whether it's a tandem, whether it's going with one bona fide guy, they can revisit that. Like, I think obviously you have to manage the workload, at least initially, for Joseph Woll, but I'm right there with you. We'll see what happens in this game, but like I wouldn't be stunned regardless of the result if they go back to Samsonov on Saturday. I think in a perfect world, you want as many guys in this crease playing well, and I say that because they still have Martin Jones, the third option. Never know what's going on with your guy Matt Murray, but like I think that could only be a positive when you have so many guys playing well. So I think that's got to be the goal for Curtis Sanford, the goalie coach, and others right now, is get Joseph Woll back in the mix, get him confident, keep Samsonov confident, and you're looking suddenly really, really good. Whereas like a couple months ago, we really wondered about the Leafs crease and what was going on there.
Yeah, it's looking pretty healthy right now. And let's just say tonight goes phenomenally and he has like a 9.6 save percentage and has some big ones and he looks just super sharp and poised and the boys have their game again in front of him. Do you throw Sammy back in on Saturday against the Rangers, who have been really hot as well lately, at home on Saturday, or do you say, okay, let's keep this thing going with Woll? I mean, I got to think that being as young as he is, they did not dick around with rushing him. He is 100%. I think that you got to assume that, say he plays 2 games, including the one with the Marlies, and he's like, no, like I don't even feel it anymore. I am 100%. He stands on his head tonight. Do you think about playing him again on Saturday and then start to be like, well, this could be the start of rolling this kid as our number one and getting him hot before the playoffs? It'll be interesting to see how they manage those two.
Maybe you go with Jonesy. He played the first 2 games against the Rangers, 1-1.
I doubt it. I think you got to keep Sam. It's always shitty when a guy loses and might have a little hit on the confidence, which I don't think Sammy should, but it's always funny listening to his interviews. You don't know what he's thinking. He barely speaks English and he's trying to get his point across. And
He's tired.
I know you hate his interviews. Yeah, he's tired. Well, he just said, I want to go home and rest. But yeah, do you do that and take a hit to Sammy's confidence while you're trying to get, I mean, fuck, it's the NHL, man. You can't tiptoe around these guys' feelings. I think you just got to go with the best chance that you feel you have to win the next game. And hopefully that's what they're going to be doing. And if they do get put in that position, it means things went really well with Joseph Woll tonight. So
yeah, exactly. And a perfect fit for tomorrow's show. Carter Hutton's going to be on, the goalie expert here, and we'll get his breakdown of Joseph Woll's performance and who the Leafs look to in between the pipes on Saturday against the Rangers. By the way, Igor Shesterkin has been fantastic for the Rangers the last month. It was a lot about Jonathan Quick earlier in the year, but the All-Star has been spectacular for that team. So looking forward to that matchup. But you don't want to look ahead too far because they still got Arizona tonight. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year and daily face-off. For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning despite your lack of team-building skills. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order and grab a sweet victory for the mouth-watering jaws of defeat, along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play daily face-off to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. So as mentioned, the second meeting with Arizona in 8 days. Back last week, a 6-3 win for the Leafs at the College Arena there, Mullet Arena. Austin Matthews, massive night, scored 2 goals, 50 and 51 in that game. Game 2 of this 5-game homestand. Here's a question for you. When's the last time the Leafs beat Arizona at Scotiabank Arena? Can you answer this?
it's going back a while. I know that. Like the 10-1-1 is their record at home against them the last 12.
The last Maple Leafs victory stems back February 11th, 2020. Scotiabank Arena, a 3-2 OT win. You got to go back even further for a regulation win. And as you referenced, 10-1-1 is Arizona in the past 12 visits to Scotiabank Arena.
That's crazy for a team that is, had the success that they've had in the regular season, like 117-point seasons, and guys that got it going with their firepower against that dog shit team is crazy. That's really crazy. That's a wild stat that they haven't beat them. So I know you thought it was a trap game last time. I kind of half-heartedly offered to shave my head if they lost. I did.
Well,
I
you
thought
doubled
there's no
down.
chance. Will I double down today? Not shaving the head. What was the other thing we were gonna? Oh yeah, I was gonna do it shirtless in Mexico. I don't think I'm doing that in Canada. A little bit of a blizzard. Well, I guess it's Chinooking now, but I'm not taking my shirt off. I don't know,
Okay.
man. I just don't see it happening. And if it does, it is a massive step back, and it would be clear that they have not, fixed their warts and solved some of their internal issues, basically mentally. I think that they are past that, and I would bet on them, and I will bet on them tonight. And I do not think that they will drop this game. I think that they have kind of figured out their woes as far as starting not prepared, taking teams unseriously, thinking they can do it themselves, thinking they can do it fancy, thinking about point night. I think they're on a different page now, and I think they have matured a little bit, and they've showed me that in the last 3 weeks or so. So I'm not expecting one of those trap game losses. How about yourself?
It's a trap game. It definitely is. I think this team has turned a corner, though. And the only reason why I call it a trap game, Arizona's fucking lost 13 straight games. I don't know how you do that. Like, this team was in a playoff spot 2 months ago. They've dropped 13 in a row. They're 0-11-2. So let me rephrase it then. Will you shave your head if you tear up during the Alex Kerfoot video tribute?
Yes, I'll shave my whole body naked live on things. I'll there's not a chance that's happening. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's just gonna be a
Welcome
quick
back,
one.
Alex.
Oh,
Yeah. Hello.
God. Thank you for everything you have done
4
for this
years.
organization. So weird, dude. I'm over them. I hope they just do it during a TV timeout. Just a quick. I don't mind a quick hello, hey, welcome back. Wave up there while you're taking a squirt of Gato on the bench. Fine. But these like video tributes and stuff, relax, dude. I think they'll pump the tires on this or pump the brakes on it this tonight.
It's really disappointing because I was trying to track Alex Kerfoot down with the Coyotes the last couple weeks to get him on this show, and everything was going great. And then Arizona started losing and losing and losing. At which point I got an email response saying, "Hey, we're not in a good headspace. This team is not good. Maybe if we turn things around," kind of thing. And they never turned things around, and they entered this game losers of 13 in a row. So Kerfoot, 58 games so far this year with the Coyotes, 9 goals, 25 assists, 34 points. Pretty much the same player there. He's been forgotten about. I know he was a Kyle Dubas favorite, but it was time to move on from Alex Kerfoot.
Yeah, I wonder like what's going on. Like being part of the Coyotes, does it feel like you're in the NHL, or is it just kind of like
Here we
a
go.
joke? Is there any accountability? Is anyone mad after a loss? Does the coach just come in and clap his hands and say we'll get him next time? Like loss after loss after loss after loss. Like, is it even feel like an NHL franchise? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, and I haven't even played in Mullet Arena, but what an embarrassment, man. Like, I just can't stand it. That's part of the league that I love, that we follow, that we care about this game, and they have this dog shit organization that just embarrasses themselves year after year.
It's a bit of a different feel, and as I mentioned last week, it's always going to be remembered as that arena where Austin Matthews hit 50 for the second time in his career, right? Like that was the big narrative this time last week. We had Chris Cuthbert on the podcast, and we were talking about setting up Matthews' 50th in front of 4,700 people, just as he built it up earlier on in his life.
Yeah, he went and got 50-51. Yeah, hopefully the rest of his career he won't have to go into that building saying, I remember my history in this barn. I hope this is the last time they ever have to play in this thing is the next year. I think they'll be there for a couple, but sadly, but hopefully not for long.
Yes. So we got Chuck Fletcher coming on in a couple of minutes to get his thoughts on the trade deadline, what to do from the Leafs perspective. Again, as mentioned, the Leafs 22-6-2 versus the Western Conference. That's been a big story. But bottom line, I just want to see a bit of a response. We talked about this the other day. Vegas fed them their lunch, and that's why they're defending Stanley Cup champions. They put up a really, really strong effort. I just want to see a response from the Leafs tonight, Rosie.
Yeah, exactly. Get back on track. We talked about that loss, about having to park it, and I'm sure they're talking about, they'll watch the video, they'll go through what happened, but I really don't think they're going to dwell on it. They've been playing too good a hockey. You lose to and again, it wasn't like some gross trap game where they weren't prepared. I mean, they started the game well. They had control early, and at the end of the day, you just got to tip your cap to the Vegas Golden Knights and say, hey, they beat us. That happens in this league, and you got to move on and refresh yourself to what you were doing the last couple of weeks. Can't hang yourself up on a loss for too long. So reset button needs to be pressed, and I think they'll be ready to rock tonight.
This segment is brought to you by Douglas, named Canada's best mattress on Canadian living. Douglas is loved by more than 200,000 Canadians, and they're backed by over 10,000 five-star reviews. Every mattress order comes with a free comfort sleep bundle, 2 memory foam pillows with pillow protectors, 1 luxurious cotton sheet set, and 1 mattress protector. Order today at Douglas.ca/LMT. As we bring in today's guest, it is Chuck Fletcher. Chuck, thank you so much for doing this. How are you?
I'm doing well, Nick.
Is that a Mikko Koivu jersey behind you, by the way?
Yeah, it's a jersey was given to me after managing my first game. We played in Columbus, lost 2-1. Andrew Burnett had the only goal for Minnesota that game, but Tony DaCosta framed up a jersey, and those were all the players that were there at the time. And at the time, we didn't have a captain. If you see, Koivu was got the alternate A there. So pretty cool memory.
That's a beauty. That is a beauty. So what have you been up to the last little while? Obviously, it's a very intriguing time of year. The trade deadline is just days away. People are excited. What have you been up to? And also, like, what's that feel from a GM's point of view this time of year in the NHL world?
Yeah, well, first of all, just living in Arizona, enjoying it. I've been getting out to a lot of Coyote games. Bill Armstrong's treated me great, and been able to get out and reconnect with a bunch of people and see a bunch of the pro scouts and management types that come through Mullet Arena. So that's been fun, and a lot of golf and hiking and tennis. And it's going to be 75 here today, Fahrenheit, 21 or 22 Celsius. So not complaining too much, but pretty nice lifestyle down here. But no, this time of the year, Nick, is, it used to be, I think, a little bit more nerve-wracking in terms of there would actually be a trade deadline day. Now it's more like a trade deadline month, it seems like, although with the Tanev deal last night, maybe that'll kickstart some more deals. But it seems like the last couple of years there have been more and more deals getting done a week or two in advance. So you're not, you don't really have a gun to your head per se, like you did where it seemed like deals used to go down maybe half an hour before the deadline in years past. So, but still you're trying to do what you can to improve your team, whether you're adding pieces to make a run or get in, or trying to maximize as many assets as you can to continue your rebuild or retool or whatever you're doing. So there's usually very few teams in the middle doing nothing. Most teams are either adding or subtracting it to some extent. So, lots of meetings, lots of pro scouts and management types jammed into boardrooms and trying to figure out what to do.
Chuck, how much does it weigh on you when you're making decisions for an organization? Like, obviously you want to make your team better, whether you're adding or subtracting, but do you look down the road a few years and say, man, if this doesn't pan out the way I think, say you're getting a rental and the run doesn't work and the assets you give up, do you think down the road of going, man, this could really blow up in my face? Or do you just say, make a final decision, this makes our team better, end of story?
No, you definitely think about the impact it could have going forward. And Jay, as you know, when one team wins the cup, and if you think you have a really good team and a good chance, and look, this is a year where there's a lot of, it seems to be relatively wide open. There are a lot of good teams. I don't know if anyone's really run away with anything quite yet. And you make those moves. I mean, you go back to last year, you look at the moves that the Bruins and Toronto made in particular, very aggressive moves, giving up multiple picks to add basically players that were rentals, and it didn't work out for them. And now you don't have all the draft currency going forward. So those decisions can impact you year over year. And we've all done it. We've all made those decisions where you give up picks, and typically it doesn't work out because only one team makes it. I mean, Brian Burke, I've worked with him for a while, and he used to, the trade deadline and first day of free agency, he used to shake his head at when teams really stepped up, because it's really hard to win. But in saying that, the one thing I remember as a GM, when, a couple of years in Minnesota, we had pretty darn good teams, and we went all in 2017, and the trade didn't work out. We gave up a first round pick and a second round pick for Martin Hansel. It didn't work out. At the time, we were leading the Western Conference in points, and I just remember thinking, if I didn't do anything at the trade deadline, how am I going to sleep the rest of the year? Like, you want to think that you gave your players a chance. You want to think that you added a piece that can show that team that you believe in them, because they've worked hard for you all year. So, there's a lot going on there, but certainly you look at it both ways.
What do you think of the price that Dallas paid to get Chris Tanev? Obviously, we've been talking about Tanev quite a couple of months, the last couple of months, I should say, here in Toronto, and ultimately they didn't get him.
Yeah, I think Dallas made a heck of a deal. I mean, I do not know the Grushnikov kid very well. I believe he was a second round pick, a defensive defenseman. I remember reading some of the reports. I haven't seen him this year. So Calgary got the equivalent of 2 second round picks. That's a solid return. So you certainly, Craig Conroy wasn't taking less. So, I mean, clearly that was the best deal in the marketplace. And to me, that's maybe the biggest thing. Nobody was willing to step up and maybe offer more than that for, who should be a very good playoff performer in Chris Tanev. And but for Dallas, you hold on to your top picks, you hold on to your top prospects, you The cap hit they took on was marginal, very small. And so great piece of business by Jim Nill. And it shouldn't surprise anybody. Jim is, in my opinion, one of the top 2 or 3 GMs in the league, and shows it year after year.
For sure. As being a Leaf centric show, we've been looking at Chris Tanev for a long time, and our eyes are starting to venture elsewhere. What can you tell us about not just the play, but the character and attitude about, say, Matt Dumba, for example, who all of a sudden is looking like a potential fit that they might go after? You're obviously pretty familiar with him.
Yeah, Matt, and I've watched Matt a lot this year out in Arizona. He signed a 1-year sort of prove it deal. Matt had some injury issues, a couple seasons ago, and the offensive part of his game hasn't been there this year. He hasn't put up maybe the points or scored the goals that he has in the past. He's being used in a lot of matchup situations, PK. He's been very physically engaged, despite having a pretty tough injury a couple of years ago. He's throwing the weight around, and I think Matt has a lot to prove right now. And again, I don't know if he's quite where he was at prior to the injury. But in saying that, he's competed and he's played more and more minutes down here for Arizona, and I think he's played pretty well.
What's it like as a GM this time of year in terms of like prospects? Like, are you having meetings well in advance of the draft to talk about, like, is there like a true list of untouchables? Like, can you describe sort of that process, how it all goes down leading up to the eventual deadline day?
Absolutely. I mean, typically, you have your player development staff that's monitoring your prospects all the time, and you're getting constant feedback. When I was a manager, we usually had January meetings. We had the pro scouts come in, but prior to that, we had the amateur scouts, and we took our first run at that draft for the draft list for that coming year. But we also went through all our own prospects and looked at all the players we had drafted in previous drafts and how players were progressing or not progressing. Typically, there was a player development person there. So you're trying to constantly keep track of how you evaluate your players, how you grade them. Are you being honest? Sometimes we'd send different people in that maybe weren't involved in drafting the player, just to make sure that you're getting an honest assessment and not an assessment of somebody that maybe has skin in the game that was involved in drafting the player. So, you want to make sure you know who you have and what that prospect's worth. Is he worth the first rounder this year? Is he worth the third rounder this year? And so you try to end up sort of ranking each future pick and as they're compared to the prospects. So you clearly want to do that, and you want to make sure you know what you have internally. And every team does that all the time. I'd be shocked if every team doesn't have a great handle on who they believe is a good prospect. You might be wrong, but everybody should have a pretty good working list.
For sure. Chuck, your dad was obviously had a big hand in the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially I looked, during that early 90s where you yourself were involved in the expansion of the Florida Panthers. I'm sure you guys spoke all the time. What are some of the differences, as you're looking at your dad running the Toronto Maple Leafs, but you're in a different market of the Florida Panthers? What can you tell me about, the market of Toronto and some of the differences between other markets in the NHL?
There's not many markets like Toronto. Probably Montreal, because you can get criticized in 2 languages at a minimum. But Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver is obviously a very hot market in terms of scrutiny and media attention. And yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. I think if you're a player or you're a coach or you're a manager, you go out, you're out in public, and people recognize you, and they know what you did the day before. They know what you did the previous game. And so there's really no place to hide. And some people thrive under that pressure, and some people don't like it. And everyone's a little bit different. So it has its pluses and minuses, but he loved it. He loved working in that market. He loved the big stage and the challenges, but a place like Florida, or I worked in Anaheim for a long time. And, you just don't have the media attention. You have some wonderful media people, don't get me wrong, that cover the team, but you just don't have the quantity of people covering you and all the cameras in your face. And so you can probably go about your job with a lot less pressure in that sense, but the pressure is still the same in terms of trying to win. But I had dinner with him last night, actually. We were actually chatting a little bit, and he feels the biggest challenge today for current managers is just the salary cap. And, when he was managing in the 1990s and 1980s, if you made a mistake, as long as your owner would give you permission to spend a little bit more money, you could go out and make another trade, and you had your budget, but you didn't have a salary cap. So you you had those internal discussions about, how much you can make up for the mistake you maybe made or the hole that you have to fill. And, I think for managers today, it's certainly a little bit more challenging because you have the internal budget, but you also have the hard cap that maybe limits what you can do. And as we're seeing right now, there's a lot of teams up against it that have tough decisions to make.
Yeah, and everybody's preaching creativity, but easier said than done. I wanted to ask you about a couple players you're familiar with dating to your time in Philadelphia. Nick Seeler's a name that's been on the radar of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What can you tell us about the player? How impressed have you been with his sort of resurgent season he's had in Philly this year?
Yeah, Nick is he's a player actually that Brent Flair and I, we drafted him in Minnesota way back when. I think it was 2011 in the 5th round. And he had a long road, through the USHL, through college, through the American League, and finally, after several years, made it into Florida, ended up in Chicago, walked away from the game for a little bit. And we brought him back a few years ago in a 2-way deal. He's such a character kid. And, he's tough. He can really throw him. I know that doesn't happen quite as often anymore, but he'll block shots. He'll take hits. He's a fierce competitor. Makes a good first pass, good skater. And, probably when we signed him in Philly, we thought he'd be more of a 7th, 8th guy, but he's really morphed into a 5th or 6th guy. And I think a guy that can play in your bottom pairing left shot, and he doesn't cheat you, and it doesn't take long to figure his game out. I mean, and that's a compliment. What he does well every night. And, but high character kid. And, I'm not sure if Philly's going to try to re-sign him or trade him, but either decision, if they keep him, that's a great decision for him. If they trade him, I'm sure some team will pay an asset because he's really stepped up the last couple of seasons.
I wanted to ask you about John Tortorella. It's no secret this day and age, the players are a lot different. Coaching them is a lot different. Managing them is a lot different. They handle themselves in a new type of way. Some would say they need more of a player's coach and a softer type of coach to handle these players. And John Tortorella is not really known for that, while, of course, being a Jack Adams winner and everything else. Was that a big decision, bringing in a personality like John Tortorella to coach this team that you were on?
Yeah, it was a long process. We spent probably 6 weeks interviewing coaches and interviewed a lot of them, all the top names. It was a summer where everybody was available, but we felt that John Tortorella was somebody that what he achieved in terms of what he'd achieved through his career, but certainly in Columbus, where he had taken a club that was in transition and found a way to not only improve the structure and hold players accountable, but also improved young players. And I think that's something that John probably does not get enough credit for. He hates when people call him John, by the way. So Torts does not get enough credit for developing players. Like, to me, he's an outstanding developer of young talent, and he is very demanding, but he's very fair, and he doesn't pick silly battles. He doesn't go after players for no reason. When he goes after you, you've typically been spoken to a couple times. You clearly know what he's expecting of you. There's no issue of communication. I've had players tell me before with other coaches, I didn't know what he wanted from me, or he didn't tell me he expected that out of me. That doesn't happen with Torts. You know exactly what he expects of you, and he gives you license offensively. If you turn the puck over making a play in the offensive zone, you're probably not going to hear about it. Now, if you do it 3 times in a row, a drop pass in the middle of the ice in the offensive zone, and give up 3 2-on-1s, you may hear about it. Mm-hmm. If you don't learn the lesson the first time. But he encourages players to get up the ice. You look at the Phillies D; they activate all the time. Sean Walker, Sanheim, these guys are up the ice all the time, and it's immediate. And if there's a turnover, it's going to be an odd man rush the other way. But he wants that. Safe as death. He wants you going. And but there are non-negotiables that he believes in, and when you cross the line, he goes after you. But I think it's a good thing, and I think he's been great for that franchise, just as he was with most of the other franchises he's been with. And his sound bites are hilarious, but there's a big heart beneath the bite and the bark. But he's very fair, and he's a great developer.
I love the accountability. And lastly, we'll just get your thoughts on Scott Laughton. I'm sort of biased to the player. He's from the same hometown as me, but I've always been fascinated with him. And it just seems like every year his name pops up. You were the GM of the Flyers. Were teams always calling? Were teams like the Leafs always calling? And what's the case with this guy? Obviously, he's an absolute stud, right?
Oh, he's outstanding. And I think it was 2019, my first trade deadline there. He was going to be a pending UFA. I might be off. I believe it was that year. And we had 2 or 3 deals done at the time, and teams were interested. Sorry, it may have been after that. It may have been 21. Sorry, not 19. But there were several teams trying to acquire him. He literally, we had made him a 5-year offer at $3 million a year, and they weren't going to accept it. And I remember he came up to my office after the skate that day, almost in tears. He really wanted to stay and be a Flyer. It meant everything to him, and he signed the deal right there. And literally had a couple really upset general managers because we were pretty far down a path. But he's a guy that drew attention every year. Who wouldn't want a Scott Laughton? He can play center, he can play wing. He can move up and down your lineup. He played left wing on the first line for time. He spent a third or fourth line center. He can kill. He can skate. He's physical. He can shoot the puck. He plays both special teams. He's a jack of all trades and a player that I think coaches, it's not hard to fit him into your lineup. And I know the Flyers really respect him. So whatever they do will be probably based on the value to the organization.
And again,
wonderful guy.
Yeah, those are the type of difference makers too, right? I mean, you look last year with Barbashev in Vegas, Lehkonen a couple years ago. Those are the guys who I think could put teams over the top, because we always bring up on this podcast, the Rangers last year went all in. I mean, they got Tarasenko, they got Kane, and people forget about chemistry sometimes, right?
They do, and when you bring in skilled guys, top guys, it usually upsets the apple cart in the top 6, and someone drops down, someone falls off the first power play. Those are much more difficult decisions than bringing in maybe a middle 6 guy that can move around, that can play anywhere, that isn't necessarily bumping out the top guys, and that's going to play hard every night. It's sometimes it's hard to get chemistry as a skill player, but when you're that type of player that comes in, your game is going to be the same anywhere you go. It's straight lines, it's being above the puck defensively, it's blocking shots, it's finishing hits, and that type of style translates to any coach versus maybe an offensive player who has to find chemistry. But he's got term left too, and it's obviously not a big AAV, a big salary. So I'm sure he would fit well with anybody, and you get him for multiple runs. But that's also why Philadelphia, I'm sure, is very interested in probably keeping him too. So it's going to be a tough decision. I'm sure it'll depend on the price and the value and where they're at in the standings. They're sitting in a playoff spot now, so. But Scott Laughton is the type. I agree with you, Nick. He's the type of guy that team should be interested in.
Chuck, love the insight. We're 8 days away from the trade deadline. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. That is Chuck Fletcher, and I think it's so cool to get that insight, man. It's deadline season. He's been in the war room. I'm always just so curious, how prospects are handled, how trades go down, even the whole Tanev process I thought was so fascinating to me, Rosie, where you look at so many teams involved. If you're Calgary, how are you okay, this is the offer we'll take and we're moving forward with it. Now we switch our focus to a Hanifin or a Markstrom trade,
Yeah, it's wild. It's fun to pick their brain. I really like that movie with Kevin Costner, Draft Day, and it just follows this GM around while he's trying to mess around at the draft and make deals and call people, and things fall through, and he's got a backup plan, and then he's got an idea where he's going to work this thing, and when it all comes through, that kind of stuff behind the scenes, people are just why didn't you get this guy? Why didn't you get that guy? It's you don't know what's going on back there, man. Those guys' hair is on fire for 2 weeks straight trying to sort out what's best for their team. And it's fun to pick their brain about what goes into it and what they think. And while we'll never know exactly what it's like, it's fun to get them on and pick their brain a little bit.
Lots of pressure, and there's only 32 of those jobs in this league, which is just crazy. The Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19+. Please play responsibly. Major announcement, Betano is the official partner of Copa America 2024, taking the beautiful game to new heights in the Americas. Join Betano on their journey of passion, unity, and unforgettable football moments. So I hit the Connor McDavid anytime goal last night. Had to wait till OT for that to hit. I'm going back to Matthews tonight, Rosie.
I was going to say Matthews' goal. I think he's going to snipe at home tonight. He doesn't mind scoring on this team, and he didn't score. Was it his only goal? And was it his only game last night that he didn't, or last game that he didn't score in how long? And it's yeah, he's due. It's hilarious how hot the guy is. Yeah. But I'd pick him to be on the board a couple of times.
2 in a row for Matthews, but I think what we've learned throughout this season, he scores a lot, and he scores in bunches. So would you be shocked at all if he gets like a Hattie? He ripped Arizona last week. I want to see a response from this Leafs team. Again, the Coyotes have dropped 13 in a row, and maybe the Leafs get that boost from getting Joseph Woll back in the pipes. That's going to be so cool to see number 60 in there.
I know that's kind of my number one excitement for tonight is to see how Woll looks and see how they're playing in front of them. It's super important for them to be off to a good start, get control of the game, get the lead even, and have Woll just be able to be comfortable and get used to his surroundings and get back in the rhythm of things. Because if you leave a guy out to dry that's supposed to be a huge part of your future months here, and you have him scrambling and put him in a bad position, that's just a tough way to get the guy going. So looking forward to a big start and to see how Woolsey's looking in between the pipes.
The other play I like, just to wrap here, I like Tyler Bertuzzi to pick up another point. He's been hot, scoring goals, 5 in the last 6, so maybe you look at that as well. But in general, I think we're expecting a response from the Leafs tonight. So that's going to do it for you this week, Rosie. You're going to be back on Monday, and hopefully we'll have a fight for you to break down from over the weekend. After tonight's game, it's the Leafs-Rangers on Saturday night. So we'll talk on Monday, okay?
I'm also excited for that Saturday matchup as well. Yeah, you bet. We'll see you guys on Monday.
So Carter Hutton's back in the mix tomorrow, which is perfect timing with Joseph Woll's return. So we'll have him break that down. We'll break down Ilya Samsonov. We're going to talk trades again, deadline season. We're going to be a week away on Friday. Darren Dreger of TSN is going to drop by tomorrow and get the very latest on the focus where that shifted now with Chris Tanev going to the Dallas Stars. So thank you, everybody in the chat. You guys are great as per usual at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe on YouTube. Thank you to our guests, Chuck Fletcher, producer Vic. Bang up job for Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk on Friday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.